Hello, welcome back to my channel. So episode 2 of this little project to fit the DRO digital readout to the Boxford lathe. Today we're focused on the cross slide. Before I can even think about fitting anything, I'm going to have to do some modifications to this. I did mention before I want to put a slot in here to fit the magnetic scale that goes inside, and I've got to extend this end by, I don't know how much exactly yet, but it's got to be extended just with an aluminium bolt-on piece, just so there's enough length for the magnetic tape that's got to go in here. Before I can do that though and make a part to go on here, I'm going to have to machine that end off because it's just rough cast and I can't mount to that yet. So first things first, I think I'll stick that in the mill. Because it's got a curve to it, it's got to obviously be flattened off, but I don't think I'll be able to clean this up without removing this whole raised section here, which I don't really want to do. So I'm going to have to probably put a chamfer or something on, I don't know yet. Once it's in the machine, I've taken a couple of cuts. We can see what we're working with and come up with a strategy for that. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Okay, so first stage machining is complete. The end, hope that's in focus. So I've taken a bit of stock off this, flattened it out, put a couple of little chamfers on to clean it up, and managed to leave as much of this sort of ridge section as possible because I thought better leave that if possible. And then the next thing to do, I think, is to take this bit of aluminium tooling plate and build our little extension onto the end of that to give us somewhere to put the magnetic tape. I haven't done my usual method of 3D printing a mock-up first, so hopefully I took some decent measurements. I guess we'll find out soon enough. But I think let's get this block into the miller and see what we can do with it. Right, so what I've done here is I have finished off the underside of the cross slide. I didn't film the machining of this part here because of reasons, but I put a slot in here. It was just about 200 mils, so just about managed to get the right amount of travel in my miller because that's about the maximum travel on the x-axis, but it came out okay. So once the extension part was mounted, it was just a case of putting a slot in it, and then I used the double-sided tape to install the magnetic strip and the stainless steel cover. So that actually, I think, looks pretty good. It's in a location that's only just clear of the nut. But I'll tell you what, I'll move the camera and I'll show you that in a close-up. Right, so here you can see the end result. If you look at the location of the lead screw nut over here, there's a couple of mil of clearance there, so we do have some clearance. So we shouldn't have an issue with that, but I did find another problem, which was with the travel. This nut has been replaced at some point, and it had been ground away to create some clearance in this channel, but unfortunately it wasn't quite ground away enough. So this nut was actually jamming inside this channel, and this has caused a small problem. Because it was stopping around about here. I measured this part based on the available travel to make sure that it would be the correct length, but it turns out it should be stopping about there. So this is a tiny bit shorter now than I would have liked. Now that I've actually put this in the milling machine and actually milled a bit off the sides of this nut, and it's still touching in a couple of spots, but I think I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and limit the travel slightly. I can't think of another way other than making a new one of these, which I don't really feel like doing. It's only a couple of millimeters. I just don't want this going too far at the back, and the wiper running off the edge here, the wiper on the reader head for the magnetic strip. So I don't have the gib in here at the moment. That's why it's all floppy. It's just to get everything lined up. What I also did, which I wouldn't recommend, I'm sure some people will think it's a bad idea, I found that the travel over here was a bit, there was a bit of wear to the dovetails, and that was causing some stick. You know, there were some spots where if you tighten the gib up in this position, you couldn't actually travel all the way to the end. It would jam up, and it would jam up this way as well. So there was a sort of a spot in the center, whereas if you tightened up the gib in this position, once you got here, the slideway was rattling about. So it's probably not the best idea, but what I did was a bit drastic. I took a bit of valve grinding compound and put it in the dovetails, and then worked this up and down with the gib tightened up and down to kind of bed it in again. And it didn't take a lot off, but it took off enough without really changing the form at all. But it did take off enough that I'll tell you what, I'll put the gib back in, and you can see. I'm not recommending this. This is not a recommendation at all. But yeah, look at that. Oops. It tightens up a little bit over there, but I can still push it. And when you're working it with the lead screw, it's really not that bad. You can barely tell that it's tightened up on that side a bit, but it's so rigid now. There's absolutely zero play on the dovetail. So whether that's a good idea or not, I don't know. But that's what I did. Even here where it's a bit looser, there's still no play at all. There's a tiny bit of play there right at the end of the travel. You don't feel that at all when you've got it actually, yeah, just the tiniest fraction. And to be fair, we're outside of our normal travel range now. Right, there's nothing there, absolutely nothing. So it's made a huge difference to the fit. Actually, what I did was I used some fine valve grinding compound and then followed it up with a bit of a polishing compound after a good clean. That was a bit of Autosol metal polish. So the fit of this whole thing is so much better now. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that the whole thing's going to work. What we've got to do next, I think, is work out what I'm going to do with the Z-axis before I start making a bracket to hold, because we're going to have a bracket on here. There's these two faces are actually flat machined faces, so we're going to fit a bracket on here that'll connect to the Z-axis glass scale, the reader head, as well as the reader head for the magnetic scale in the cross slide. I think I'll get the scale fitted down here before we start looking at what we're going to do with this bracket, because I think it's going to be easier to just sort out both at the same time. But that's the next thing to do, and I've got a few ideas about how I'm going to do that, and we'll get to that next episode. Yeah, so that's the progress so far. As I said, next thing to do is the Z-axis. We'll get the scale in there. I have a few ideas of how I want to do it. Something that occurred to me, I've seen a lot of people drill and tap a hole in the side of the bed and then put together some kind of mounting system with some kind of adjustment on it so they can get it all squared up. I've had this idea that I might have a go at mounting some aluminium blocks onto the side of the bed and epoxying them in place, and then drilling into the bed to lock them in place with some screws. But just to start with, sticking them on with some epoxy, and that way I can use this little 3D printed guide, a sort of a fixing template, which will locate off of the top of the bed and then position the mounting point in the correct location. And if I make it with enough clearance that I can get some epoxy in there, I should be able to affix two sort of mounting points to the bed that are secure, but also pretty much exactly in line and squared up to the bed itself. So that's kind of my thinking, to avoid having to have too much adjustment, because I can see that being a bit of a pain in the arse. So that's kind of my thinking. Whether it works or not, I don't know. That's something we're going to try. But I've already 3D printed my sort of mounting guide. I don't know if that'll work. We'll give it a go. But that'll have to be next episode. Meantime, I have moved the machine out to get around to the back and stripped everything off to make a bit of access. So yeah, should get to that soon. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching.